Via telephone, financial Phil McCoy. Good morning, Philip.
Good morning, guys. How are you all?
We are well, Phil, and yourself.
I am living the dream, sir, on a rainy Monday morning after another Steeler victory. It's a good day.
Should I tell Dylan to put his headsets on now or wait till you actually call him out, Phil?
No, Dylan is – I'm a friend of Dylan Bishop. He's a Ravens fan, but he's somehow a classy Ravens fan. He listens to my garbage every Monday morning when I call. And I know he's in the background going, yep. He's not really paying attention. I give Dylan a lot of credit. And the job that he did on that wonderful high school football game that I watched from Atlanta. Those guys did a tremendous job covering that football game.
So what does that sound in the background that sounds like a cow that's in pain?
That would be my windshield wipers that are in pain. I'm getting ready to pull over here in a second, so they'll stop.
Phil,
my windshield wipers.
Can you buy new windshield wipers? As much money as you take in, can't you spare a few bucks for windshield wipers?
Stop shaming me. They still work. They still get the rain.
This is your winter. This is your winter clover issue to me, Phil. Getting you new windshield wipers.
Here we go.
Yeah.
I thought Lamborghinis came with. I thought Lamborghinis came with really good windshield wipers.
I just know about once a month Rob is going to shame me. He's going to basically refer to me as being cheap. I know that's what he's getting at.
I didn't say that.
Cheap. Yeah,
I didn't say that.
Insinuated it.
But I want to. Hey, you mentioned the Martinsburg game, and Dylan. This is, I think, Nick in his sportscast called it an instant classic. This came down to a 2-point conversion. This was a game Martinsburg won easily earlier in the year. Was anybody expecting this game to be this dramatic?
No, I went into it figuring I didn't think it would be too much different than the first game, but it was 7-7 at halftime. Huntington went up, or Martinsburg went up 21-7, and then let Huntington score 3 touchdowns in a row to take the lead back 28-21. So it was, and then as you said, it played out. Martinsburg scored 2 in a row. It was 35-28. Huntington goes down, scores a touchdown with 40 seconds left, goes for 2, just tried to run it up the middle, and it sure did not work.
35-34 final. So they went for 2 instead of wanting to go to overtime, huh?
I thought that was the right call to go for 2. I just didn't think that just the run up the middle with Keegan Sack, their starting running back, was the right move. I've been kind of said all year on the games that if you want to run the ball against Martinsburg, you got to have some sort of unpredictability to your run game, and they lined up in the pistol with one running back behind them, and it was like, well, if they're going to run the ball, just watch where the running back goes, left or right, linebackers follow him, and I think defensive line even just plowed through and got the tackle in the backfield.
I'm not a fan of the overtime rules in college or in high school. I think that you should just play overtime. Play the game the way the game was played for the first 48 or 60 minutes and play real football. I don't see how starting at the 25 in the NCAA, or even worse, the 10 in high school, proves who the better team is after you've already gone through 48 minutes of being even. So I've never been a big fan of the overtime rule since they instituted it in high school. I don't understand it. I don't get the reasoning for it, and I think it should be changed back to just let's kick off and have a regular game until somebody wins. It's not going to kill these kids. It wouldn't have killed me when I was that age to play another quarter, and if we have to, 2 quarters of football. Play the game. Give it the just ending it deserves. But it didn't come to that because they went for 2. They failed, and so now you get a Martinsburg Spring Mills final, which – what are these schools are separated by, 10 miles?
If that, yeah.
Right? 7 miles, I guess. This is going to be huge, but they've got to go all the way to Charleston to play this game. You're going to take 2 schools 7 miles apart in the Eastern Panhandle and drive everybody down to Charleston to play the game.
It feels pretty silly, but
it does.
It is what it is.
Yeah, and if you look at it the other way, if you tried to adjust the playing site every year, depending on what teams participated, then there'd be a logistical nightmare.
This game should be played in Morgantown. These championship games should be at WVU's Coliseum every year, and they should find a way to make it work.
Yeah, I yelled to that, yeah.
This is the way it should be done. You want these kids. This is a chance to play in a title game. You want to have the coolest setting possible. And in West Virginia, that setting is in Morgantown. That's where the game should be played.
And it's more convenient to the fans to get there.
Certainly more central if you're in the Eastern Panhandle. But this is huge. Last year, the team I coached, we played our biggest rival, Linganore, in 2023 in the 3A state championships in Annapolis at the place at the stadium where Navy plays, and that was, I mean, the two communities just emptied out and packed. You know, you don't sell out a stadium that size for a high school game in this area, maybe in Texas, but just packed that stadium like I don't think it had been packed before. And that's going to be, I think, what the scene is going to be like with Spring Mills and Martinsburg. You're going to empty the Eastern Panhandle, take it to Charleston for this game. This is going to be huge all week long, the hype for this, the game itself, because this, Dylan, was a close game when they played it earlier.
It was really out until this past Saturday. It was the only time Martinsburg had gotten any sort of resistance to winning by 20, 30 points. So the first game lived up to the hype. And I don't really know one way or the other, if especially after what Huntington was able to do, if what to expect from the rematch. My instinct would be, my gut would be to say that it's more likely that Martinsburg plays a better game than Spring Mills. Spring Mills plays a better game compared to the first one, but I would have thought they were going to beat Huntington by another 20 or 30 points. So I don't know. The experience
of being in a title game has got to help Martinsburg. Spring Mills, this will be the first time for them. It's a lot of nerves for that title game.
Yeah, a lot of adrenaline too. And I played in a couple of those games long time ago, and it was in Charleston when I got to play in it. And the first time around that we played in it, I mean, just being from our standpoint, small single A school back in Mate 1, but we were a pretty good team. And the first time we played in it, we felt no pressure because we really felt like we weren't supposed to be there. Nobody expected us to be there, and far outplayed who we were playing, even though we lost. It was untimely fumbles. It still haunts me at night. The next year we go back as heavy favorites, and that's when we felt the pressure. We felt pressure the next year, not the first year. So I think that pressure in a game like this can go both ways. Everybody expects, regardless of what happened last weekend, everybody expects Martinsburg to win this football game. Talked to my brother down in Charleston. He said, why don't you guys just keep those guys up there and let Martinsburg beat them up there instead of bringing them down here? Everyone expects Martinsburg to win, which is to say Spring Mill shouldn't feel any pressure whatsoever. I think all the pressure's on Martinsburg, and that experience may be a reverse impact where Spring Mills is playing more loose and more excited to play than what Martinsburg is and feels no pressure.
Yeah, that's an interesting take on that. I can see that line of logic as well. But they will play.
You have nothing to lose. If everyone expects you to lose, you have nothing to lose. So worst case scenario, they just go out there and play loose and free. And I know that those kids. I don't know those kids. I know Buddy Hessen, and I know that they're and I know how intense he can be. That they're fired up and they believe that they can win. They probably have a chip on their shoulder, but at the same time, no pressure because everybody expects Martinsburg to win.
It would be good if there was a way to work this out with Shepherd University to get Shepherd to be the Eastern Panhandle host site for some championship games once in a while.
And I'm sure Shepherd would love to do that.
Yeah, and it's kind of cool. It is kind of cool having everyone at the same site. You get the other teams get to come watch you play. And even though, you're traveling all the way down to Charleston. Now, Charleston used to be different when I was playing. It was kind of the hub of the state. It's not anymore. It's kind of sad down there. But having all the other teams at a central location, a different stadium, that stadium is kind of nice. It's old and rustic, but it's kind of nice. But so I think there is an attraction for that, even if you're driving 6 or 7 hours away. Another sport, volleyball, you've seen it often where Musselman and Hedgesville had to go all the way down to Charleston to play, and then the schools from around the state would come root against us or root against you or root for you. And so, but they don't get a lot of views from the teams in the Eastern Panhandle, and that could be some exposure. There'll be a lot of people there, not just from the Eastern Panhandle, but they'll pack them in from around Charleston too, and the surrounding areas. They want to come watch these two teams play.
Move it to Morgantown, baby. Play it there. Give those kids the thrill of a lifetime, chance to play on the college field. How cool would that be?
Yeah, and you would think, it makes those kids, the top players in the state, more likely to want to go to WVU after having that experience on their field. But it seems like the WVU is never too interested in the top players in West Virginia.
I was going to say,
so.
if WVU bothered to offer them, yeah.
Yeah.
No, they don't care at all about that. But I like that idea too, to go to WVU, go back and forth maybe between WVU and Marshall. I think that would be kind of cool as well, even though Marshall was farther away. But you get like a biannual kind of exposure to both of those schools, or to pass it around through the Division II schools in the state. Let's not forget about the Shepherds and the Charlestons of the state as well. There's a lot of good schools in West Virginia that would probably love to host that game.
Phil, let's talk money, baby.
Let's do it.
Yeah, we are on a pretty good roll for this calendar year with the markets, and about 3 weeks left in it. Excuse me, to find out what kind of a final number that we'll have. But so far, if you had an S&P 500 index fund in your retirement plan, you're up, about 26% year to date?
You're up a lot, and, I want to go back to last Monday as I sat in the same spot as I'm sitting in right now. And I remember talking about this amazing rotation out of technology and the broadening of the market and what happened in November. And the very first thing that happened in December was technology took off yet again. And we always have and you had asked about the fear of the bubble and so forth. And I think last week shows us there's still room to run. Doesn't mean that it will, but there's still room to run with technology and that magnificent seven that led everything last week. So looking at last week's performance, the NASDAQ outperformed the Dow by 3.5% in 1 week. The Dow was actually negative last week. And again, not to dismiss the Dow, but we pay much closer attention to the S&P and probably the NASDAQ than what we do the Dow Jones indice. But last week alone, the NASDAQ was up 3.5%. Now, the narrative going into this week, and it really is boring, is we kind of search for different narratives or different things to talk about. But let's go back to Bill's alphabet soup of reports with Wednesday the CPI and Thursday the PPI, and that will be the focus of the Federal Reserve on December the 18th, whether or not to cut. Last Monday, and I've already changed my mind, last Monday I said even though the odds were 65% of a rate cut on December 18th, I said I didn't think they were going to because of the way the economy looked. I didn't think that they needed to, and maybe bracing for tariffs as the year turns over to 2025. But just with the information that we got last week with that jobs report that you had brought up, I changed my mind. I do think they're going to cut unless the reports on Wednesday or Thursday can change my mind again. And now those odds have gone all the way up to 88% of a rate cut on December the 18th. And that is why our markets did so well last week.
There was a critic now of rate cuts I heard on the CNBC financial report that said that inflation is creeping back up into the lower threes. Wages are going up, which helps to drive inflation. And the Fed should not cut again this year, Phil, because they'd be cutting into a higher inflation environment if they did that, which would, in theory, then feed more inflation.
You can make a strong argument for that for the reasons that you just laid out, and to brace for these tariffs because, the tariffs are expected to be an inflationary pressure. I'm not saying people that are for the tariffs, I'm not saying that the tariffs are a bad thing. I'm not insinuating that, but they are an inflationary pressure. So one would think it would be a reasonable thought to say, well, we need to brace for this because, like you had said, inflation's kind of stalled. It depends on the report that you look at. Is it the core, the overall, the CPI? There's all the alphabet soups that we get to look at, and they all say something slightly different. But the overall trend has been flattening out, so that this drop down to 2% has stalled. There's yet another stumbling block to inflation getting down to that target. And like John Gilstrap thinks, I agree. Why don't you just stop at 2.5? I don't disagree with that at all. But they stay steadfast with this 2% target. And now we believe anyway that there's going to be more inflationary pressure with tariffs. So why not wait? I wouldn't disagree with that critic at all. And if they decided to do that on the 18th, I would completely understand their reasoning for doing so. But the odds of a rate cut have already creeped back up to 88%. That's about as certain as it gets this far out from that meeting with reports waiting to happen. That's about as certain as it gets.
In a recent interview, President-elect Trump said that he would not replace Jerome Powell now as Fed chairman. Phil, your boy is safe.
Well, he's not, because I don't think he can until his term is up. But I think Jerome Powell reiterated that when they had asked him about it, was that he's not worried about it because I don't think he can replace him until his term is up. So, and he should be safe. You know, you and I both have argued on the merits of Jerome Powell over the years, but to this point, he has done a terrific job with the maneuvering of the interest rates. And yeah, and looking back, there was mistakes, and he's admitted that the transitory position that he had taken early on was a mistake. And yeah, and I understand why he made the mistake. I get it, and that's why I gave him a pass on it when others may not have. But to this point, you have to applaud the Federal Reserve and their how they remain steady with what they've done with the interest rates. Even if I disagree with, like, why not 2.5% instead of 2%? Why that outrageous, it seems, target down to 2%? And I would, you know, John and I, Gilstrap, both agree that 2.5 would be sufficient. But to this point, I don't know how you could argue that they've done a really, really good job with the maneuvering of the interest rates.
John, you've been called out twice during this conversation.
I know.
I called out. Remember what and I agree with him. I completely agree. It said that years ago. Why not 2.5%? And I agree.
But
2.5% is very acceptable.
But you're glossing over the results of not doing that. You know, he's the fire chief that decided to let the city burn to conserve water. You know, it's just not a good
It's such
strategy.
an interesting analogy.
It is. I love analogies, and I do like that analogy. and without saying it, I wouldn't say that I glossed over it, but it peaked out at around 9%. And when you look at what COVID had done, and look at what COVID had done to other economies around the world, they would have loved to have our 9%. So looking at what they were dealing with, an economy that was shut down altogether in 2020, not just the United States, but globally, and then the infusion of money from whether it was the PPP, the Triple P, the Paycheck Protection Plan or Act or whatever it was, you had all of the inflated and extended unemployment benefits, and that wasn't just the United States. That was around the world where measures like that were taken. So we infused all economies with cash, locked us up for a while, and then said, here, go crazy. And, so the way, it got to 9%, and they admitted that was, an error that they waited too long. But looking at why that error occurred, it made sense why that error occurred. And then comparing it against other developed economies, our 9% was probably better than any other major economy around the world. So, it was an error, and it did get pretty ugly. But what they have done to bring it back down, I think they've done a great job.
Phil, let's talk sectors for a couple of minutes. I know you do not want to go to individual stocks, but we do talk sectors.
Did you say Tesla or sector?
Sector, not Tesla.
He said sectors. Leave him alone.
Leave him alone, Rob. Thanks, Phil. That's my question, Phil. Hey, Phil, there's a couple of actions that the incoming president's going to take. Been well publicized, well discussed. Tariffs for one, deportation is a second. In case of both, the tariffs going to affect the retail market, the deportation, the hotel industry, the food production, the agriculture, and the like. Is the market taking any steps at all to position themselves about this? Probably not possibility, but eventuality.
In some cases, but not those two in particular. I am kind of surprised about the as you mentioned, the tariffs, because that seems to be the most certain thing that's going to happen, the tariffs and the deportation. I don't know that there's been any action as far as placing assets or markets falling or rising because of those two movements. But what has happened, and it doesn't really have anything to do with other than the party that's in control for all three branches, but the financial sectors. Look at the financial sectors and how well they have done since the election. So if you go to, I think it's XLF, that's an exchange traded fund. Don't hold me to that ticker symbol, but where you can look at the financial sector as an entirety, has done extremely well since the election on the perception that there's going to be less regulation on financials, that they will be able to make more money and profit more readily. So therefore, that sector has probably, to this case, even including technology, has probably been the winner, the overall winner since that. So the only movement that I have seen, that I have noticed, is in the financial sector, and it really has nothing to do with the tariffs or deportation. But I do, like you said, I think that will have some sort of impact on the markets, in some cases good and some bad. But let's think about, and I'm one that agrees with, and I don't want to get political too much, but I agree with some of the deportation measures they take. It has become a problem over the past years with too many illegals in the country. But we have to keep in mind with what some of these people are doing. Some of these, with the influx of people, they spend money. And regardless of how they got money, I can know people's typing right now saying, yeah, but the money was given to them, or they didn't earn the money, or whatever it may be. That's not the point. They're spending the money. And when they spend the money, if they're going into Walmart and they're buying dish detergent and body soap and the like, they're spending money, and that profits Walmart, and that shows up into our portfolio. So there could be a deflationary, if you will, effect that comes from the deportation measures that they plan on taking, because that will be less people to spend money.
Not to mention, John Gilstrap, how difficult it might be to get drywall jobs done.
Or to buy books.
I don't think buying books is a big
John's
thing.
books.
I don't think book buying is going to be affected a lot.
Well, John had an interesting little drywall anecdote a couple of months ago.
Yeah, a friend of mine is a drywall contractor, and he claims that if we do away with all illegals, that no drywall goes up. I don't know if that's true or not, but it seems to me that people are going to want drywall, so the market will shift. We have to decide what we want. What's the higher priority?
And who's going to do these jobs?
We want most.
Yeah, you want cheap labor, or you want law-abiding citizens? And can you have both?
Why not?
I think there used to be.
It's America. We can have
There you
everything.
go.
Yeah.
We can have
whatever you
everything,
want.
John.
Yeah.
Phil, I need a prediction for the Keystone State Super Bowl this week. Steelers, Eagles.
Oh man, this gauntlet that's coming up, and I cannot go against my Pittsburgh Steelers, but this may be the toughest game that they play all year. They don't play well in Philadelphia. They never have. I'm going to say that my Steelers step up and win 16-13, an old school score. They're going to have to find a way to stop Saquon Barkley. I'm not too overly worried about Philadelphia's passing game. But Saquon Barkley is a stud, and they got to find a way to stop him. We're going to win that ball game 16-13. 1 touchdown, 3 field goals.
My prediction is, because I love irony, Jalen Hurts gets injured. Kenny Pickett comes in and throws the winning touchdown pass with time expiring, Phil.
Dear God. If that happens, I'm not calling in next month. If that happens,
Oh, mercy.
Don't even wait for a text. I'm not calling.
You remember Kenny's career, the first 58 minutes were stomach churning, but for whatever reason, the last 2 minutes, he could get it done. I never did understand that. Phil, how do we reach you for more information today, sir?
You can reach us at 304-263-4343 or stop by and see us with an appointment at 1270 Winchester Avenue or right here in Martinsburg.
Wonderful, Phil, to speak with you again. Any final advice from Mr. Gilstrap before you go?
No, sir. Just and the advice for everyone is stay diversified. Try not to get overly excited about what's happened so far this year or what's going to happen next year. Keep that same diversification that you've had all along.
Thank you, Phil. Have a great day.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
And catch 2 Minutes of Phil weekday mornings at 6:38, replayed at 7:38 for his take on the market.